Welcome to the Cup of Joe Show, where we explore the journey of recovery from alcohol and drug addiction. One story, one conversation, and one step at a time. I'm your host, Joe, creating a safe space for honest discussions about the challenges and triumphs of addiction and alcoholism. In each episode, we'll hear inspiring stories and uncover tools that make healing possible. Sobriety is not a one-size-fits-all journey, and you don't have to face it alone. Recovery is possible, and it's worth it. Thank you for joining the Cup of Joe Show. Now let's get started. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Cup of Joe Show. I'm your host, of course, Joe. And I want you to know if you are out there struggling right now, please reach out for help. You do not have to suffer in silence. I'm really excited about my guest today, Dave C. Dave's been sober since September 20th, 2023. He's a father, a lifelong learner, and a man who's discovering that recovery is about far more than putting down a drink. After spending years believing he wasn't enough, Dave found a new way to live through recovery. Today, he's building a life centered on family, connection, service, and the courage to keep growing one day at a time. Grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's get into it. Hey, Dave, how you doing?
Joe, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, man, it's an honor, and I really appreciate your willingness to share your story. Dave and I kind of go way back in the program, and I'm ad-libbing, Dave, and we were just talking earlier about how we have a connection because we're both fathers, and our children are a few years apart, but we kind of raised them in recovery, so to speak. So I think you're really going to enjoy what Dave has to say. So there you go. That's my ad lib for the day.
I think you did a better job with my intro than I wrote for myself. So we can wrap this up now. Thanks for having me on. No, first off, Joe, it's always been a pleasure knowing you in my recovery journey. And I think what this has always been about for me is struggling to find connection. And what I was looking for, even from an early age, I guess I could start off and kind of talk about, what it was like being a kid. And, I hear a lot of people talk about the idea of being uncomfortable in their own skin. And I guess the best word for it is I was just a little bit of a spaz. I was just all over the place. I was happy to, I was happy. I was a happy baby. My parents said I used to eat mulch and bang my head against the wall, which, explains a lot today. But, all in all, I was a middle child. I had, my parents got married at 19, were high school sweethearts and stayed together through my dad's passing just over a year ago from cancer. And I had a blast being a kid. Like we talked about before, I was, one of the last generations of the latchkey kid where, we came back in when when it got dark outside. We had a lot of autonomy. Gangs were mostly operated on bicycle. And, I loved being a kid. I had a pretty abrupt change right around the time. And this is something that's been consistent across my sobriety journey, is that, my alcoholism and puberty kind of, they sprung up together. And this idea of, being different, and then also having things to hide for the first time, like these new secrets, and discovering my body a little bit and what it meant to be a young man, but also the, this desperate need as I got to be a teenager to try and fit in. And to do what other kids were doing and to look the part. Back then it was like the rugby shirts and Ralph Lauren and the Jordans and by gosh, like, I just, I had to look the part or I was going to be different. And, so one crucial part of my story, happened around that time. I think I was 12 or 13 and had something fairly, it wasn't traumatic in a physical sense. It was traumatic in an emotional sense, that, I went from being a pretty well-adjusted, happy, popular kid to suddenly being like the pariah of the school. And in my little world, um, you know, uh, middle school was my whole life. Sports and community, everything. Most of the kids in my area. I grew up in Knoxville, so most of the kids in my area went to one or two swimming pools. They played 3 or 4 different main sports, and my world felt big at my age, but also felt very, very small at the time. And that was when this incident happened. All these people that I were convinced were my close friends kind of shunned me a little bit. Some of that could have very well been true and in actuality, but a lot of it I think existed in between my ears, and that's where that's where I created the most chaos. And so trust for me was a very difficult thing. I went from feeling loved and to feeling very much on the outside. I couldn't tell my parents what was going on out of shame. And I certainly couldn't face my accusers. I was a 6th grader going up against some 8th graders. To me, they looked like giants. They had hair on their legs and stuff, right? And they were, but it was awful. It was awful. I would go home with quote unquote stomach aches. It was the first time that I'd started to experience panic and alcohol. It was right around that time that we started having those little basement parties, in the suburbs where the cool parents would just let the kids, go downstairs with their beers or their Zimas. And as long as they were supervised, then I guess the parents just thought it was okay. So, that was where I started to, I guess, reemerge. I'd come out of my skin and find this new version of myself that I thought I liked. And, for me, drinking was not, it was not bad always. I had some really good times drinking, but it was always like some literature that you and I are both familiar with talks about is like the actor who's leading a double life. I was trying to make the grades. I was also trying to participate and be a good son, but I had this other life, of running around drinking. Drugs are definitely part of my story as well. And man, it just, I did what other kids did. I thought that was going to be my conduit to security. And it was definitely like a lot of things in my life, kind of defense mechanisms. I was trying to protect myself from discomfort and definitely seek comfort in some unhealthy ways. So, I'm not, like I said, the middle child, but both my sisters are, happily married to both to great men. They have amazing kids, and I'm still in kind of in my mind, kind of that, that black sheep that never got married, raised the kid on his own. I have a son that's 20, about to turn 21. And, I'm getting to a place now where I like my story, and I like the life that I'm curating. I don't feel like there's a lot of things that I would change right now, but yeah, that idea of different, it definitely echoed through my childhood, and and it definitely followed me into recovery.
You said you were talking about 6th grade, man. I had I look back and I had a pretty, I would say, traumatic, emotional 6th grade situation. It was crazy how I built it up in my head. I was threatened by some kid and was gonna to fight, and I was a chronic conflict avoider, and I literally hid out and was late to school almost every day for 6th grade, all because I wanted to avoid this fight, this imaginary fight that was probably never going to happen, but in my head, it was gonna be something real bad. And he just reminded me when you were talking about 6th grade about that, and that was, I look back on that, man. I just want to hug that kid and be like, man, you are making mountains out of molehills, or as our old friend Ron used to say, pole vaulting over rat turds. That was kind of. But man, for a kid, it's like these are big deal things and big traumatic things, and I carried a lot of that, into my adulthood. And I think we try to fix a childhood sometimes that can't be fixed. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of been my, we spend a lot of time as adults trying to fix things that really can't be fixed. We can find a better way to live, and anyway, I think that's what recovery offers us. And I didn't mean to get on again. I get on these tangents, Dave. I'm sorry, but
I like tangents, and I've never been really I've never been the most concise sharer in my recovery journey, and I warned you before we got on here that there could be some colorful language and definitely some jumping around. But the thing that I had to come into agreement with is that my recovery journey has been my own authentically, and it's certainly as much as it's probably looked like a lot of other people's, to me it was those differences rather than the similarities that that caused me the most pain in AA. And so I guess to catch you up, I went off to college. I was a pretty smart kid. They back then they still had this thing called TAG, which was it stood for like talented and gifted, which we got to go on some trips, and we occasionally got to leave class. So to me, I was all for it. But it was something that gave me some validation early on. I was pretty decent at sports, and I was pretty good at tests. But right around that, that 6th, 7th grade period, it was when I really stopped opening books. I relied purely on, wit and sarcasm and manipulation to pass classes. And, I took those keen study habits away to university with me. And, for the first time in my life, I was away from home. I didn't have a lot of healthy coping skills. And the first night that I got on campus officially, we got introduced to Mary's BP, which was they take a Polaroid of you. If you have a good fake ID, they take a Polaroid of you, stick you up on a wall, and you never have to worry about showing ID in there again. You're one of Mary's kids, and and you had unfettered access to alcohol. So I got I got blackout drunk with my 3 new roommates, and and I was off to the races. School was not a super big priority to me, and it reminds me of this story, and I want to just kind of create, I guess, a visual for you of like what recovery has looked like for me. Is that when I got onto campus for the first time, and this was down in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I went down with my dad. We toured the campus, and while I was there, I got to see the dorm that I was going to be living in. Well, there was this young, energetic dude with a, big smile on his face, a great disposition, and just, seemed like a genuinely friendly guy. And he was the first person I met on campus. He was not the guy that gave me the tour. He was just around campus doing stuff over the summer. And that's what I would call like the angel tapping me on the shoulder, right? Like this guy was like, hey, I'm so excited, to get you on campus. He got me introduced to student government, which I was involved in for a little bit. But like he represented the nice guys, the good guys, the guys that did their homework, that treated women with respect, still was involved in some cool extracurricular stuff, but they were kind of more of the dorks. I wanted to be with the bad boys, so I respected what he had to share with me, but knew that there was something else that I was looking for. I wanted the guys that, hung out with the crazy women, and I found them when I came back to campus. So the devil was always kind of tapping me on the shoulder a little bit of like, hey, just like, let's check this out a little further before we make a big decision. I want to make sure we're really weighing this out. And, so I always even from the beginning, gravitated towards the people that drank the way that I drank. And so, yeah, I went the other route. I look at sometimes, not regretting the past, but like just looking at if I'd followed my better judgment or followed my heart, like, how different my college experience could have been, because I made it about 1.5 years before I failed out. I drank pretty much, I'd say 85-90% of the time. Did some things in blackouts that I certainly wasn't proud of. Never got arrested, but as my old sponsor put it, I was violating my standards faster than I could lower them. And so college did not last long in Chattanooga for me. I was back home at mommy and daddy's pretty quickly, and and had to start doing the community college route. So.
Well, at least you made it to the 4-year school before you went to community college. I spent 6 years in community college. I was a mess. I was an absolute mess. I look back and I remember my mom going, "You could have been a doctor," and I'm like, "No, I could not. Absolutely not. I was failing out of community college." And were there was there like any thoughts in your head that you might have a problem with drinking, or was there anybody saying anything at that time?
I remember waking up on the front porch of a fraternity house. There was this girl that I'd always had a big crush on, and she was almost like this mythical figure. She was one of my buddy's older sisters, and she was away at I guess you'd call it like a girls' like private school. While we were here doing public school in Knoxville. And I remember that I had apparently gotten sick off of the front porch, and I woke up in her lap on a porch swing, and she was brushing my forehead and being really nice to me. And that was for me kind of that I have arrived moment. Like this works out in my favor. Oh my gosh. Like I got blackout drunk, got sick, and here's my dream girl. So yeah, the writing was on the wall pretty quickly. There was some stuff that happened in high school to where like I couldn't reconcile the night. And for somebody that had been so emotionally aware and so sensitive over the years, you know what I mean? Like particularly after that stuff had happened, I was a performer and a porcupine at the same time. As that, let me adapt and sell you the version that I think that you need, so that you will not abandon me, so that you'll think better of me than I think of myself. So yeah, from the very beginning, I did not drink for the taste. I think the first beer that I ever had, I was pretty young. My dad let me have a sip of his beer when we were over at at a family gathering, and back in Nashville. I was very fortunate to have a fantastic family, but they there was drinking on both sides, and but the first time I got to drink the way that I wanted to drink, I was drinking to get drunk. And so yeah, I'd say probably around 16 was the first time that I realized that one, that I could drink a lot. I'm not a super big guy, but I could drink with the big guys, and kind of drink all night. And I don't know, it was not a good look on me. I would say and do things that I couldn't remember. And, in some cases, people thought that was awesome. And then in other cases, I was also very, maybe abrupt and cruel to people that didn't deserve it. I was a very hyperactive kid that picked on his older sister a little bit, trying to get a rise out of her. And so I definitely, I got my payback later in life, but yeah, drinking was a problem from the very beginning.
Yeah, no, I can relate, especially thinking it just helped me. It helped me to fit in, and I thought, man, I really can drink. I was pretty small too, and I was like, man, I can drink quite a bit for, I was in high school. My senior year, I wrestled 122 pounds, but man, I could I could drink with the best of them. And it's funny, like looking back, like thinking we think that that's something, like we think that that's a good thing, and that's the kind of stuff I think that probably cost me dearly in the long run, because I could drink so much that I didn't think it was a problem for a long time, So I guess it kind of leads me to thinking, were there any times that you tried to stop, and couldn't, or looking back were like, I didn't really want to stop?
Oh man, so definitely. And it's a great question because, as you'll hear, I came into recovery through Alcoholics Anonymous. And like I mentioned before, I was definitely, I was not happy to be there upon my first visit. I'd gotten a DUI, but in my, rationalizing mind, I got hit by three underage, under 21 sorority girls that were leaving Cotton Eye Joe's. This is back, and sorry for you non-locals, but back when they were doing the construction on the bridge over Interstate 40 at Lovell Road right there. They had it down to 2 lanes. My buddy Jeremy and I, we'd been out drinking that night. I was driving, and it hadn't been a particularly wild night, but these three, college girls were leaving Cotton Eye Joe's around midnight. They had the bridge cut down to 2 lanes, and we hit head on I was going about 45 and they were going about 50. So that tried and true Subaru thing. They were in a Subaru and I was in an old 86 BMW 3 Series that didn't have any airbags. And, I broke my femur, I shattered a kneecap. I had some other injuries, and my buddy Jeremy, luckily he was okay. He had some torn ligaments in his ankle, but, I woke up in a hospital bed, post-surgery, and, was very close to losing my life that night. So, but this coincides with my drinking is that, since technically they were at fault, this wasn't something to worry about. It was a first offense. My attorney told me like, hey, look, you've never been in trouble before. We'll be able to get this knocked down. And we'll probably be able to get you some money since, they were uninsured and you've got uninsured motorist. And so, that was the beginning of the crazy, I guess you could say. I did get some money from that wreck. I was still on my magic sticks or my crutches from the femur accident, from the femur break, and ended up picking up another DUI before I was even off crutches. That connection that I mentioned to you before, for me, I was a bar drinker. I love drinking in bars. I was always good at I guess the wrong things, man. I wanted to become like a bar Olympian. So I was very good at pool and darts, and, golden tee, anything that was that could prove my masculinity inside those bar walls was something that, that I strove to get good at. And so that night, it just happened to be one of those, I think it was like import night, of course, like dollar beer night or something like that. And I forgot to flip my headlights on, and a state trooper got me coming out of Bailey's. And so he, asked me if I could perform a field sobriety test. And I'm like, dude, I'm on crutches, for my last DUI. That was like 6 months ago. So, that was where the problems really started. And so, I think I was 22, 23. Right after that DUI occurred, my attorney gave me the first chunk of that settlement, and I was off to the races. I started experimenting with some other dry goods and stuff that lengthened my ability to drink. So yeah, that was when things started to get a little crazy. And then, the next really year and a half of my life, I went from working kind of a corporate like sales job, to which I was pretty good at. Like I liked what I was doing. Yeah. I was making money. The repercussions, I guess, got quelled down enough that I was just like, okay, you know what? You're just a stupid kid learning some hard lessons. Let's make better decisions. And for me, that just the whole try and will my way into better thinking just never really worked. I did a lot of drinking and a lot of driving, and it's hard to look back on it now. I became a father shortly, thereafter. And this is a big part of my story is that, I was 24. I'd gone out and bought the car that I thought was, most fitting to my rugged masculine personality. So I had to go get me a nice big lifted Jeep, to prove that I was clearly an outdoorsy, hyper masculine kind of dude. And, and I certainly wanted to look the part. I met a girl in a bar, and it was the first time that I don't know. I was always very comfortable, I guess, with with using sex to be the intimacy, accelerator. I didn't know how to form healthy relationships or connections with people, and sex was just kind of, that was my way. And so I ended up going home with a girl the first night that I met her, and again, to follow along with my victim narrative in my mind, she told me that she was on depot, and and to take certain liberties, and I did, and and I trusted in what this person told me, and came to find out later that she was not on any birth control, and this bravado and ego that I was so desperately trying to push out was what had kind of made me a target for this. And, so careful when you go peacocking out there, you might just get what you want or what you're looking for. And I ended up becoming a dad at a pretty young age, unplanned, unwed. I didn't know her, I didn't even know this person. And, and that's kind of what I guess drinking kind of, what it was doing for me quickly was getting outweighed by what it was doing to me. I ended up in a pretty nasty custody battle in which my parents always came to my rescue. I was very lucky to have, parents that loved me no matter what. I put them under a tremendous amount of stress, and they were also, instrumental in not just the custody battle part, but, helping me raise my son while I was still dealing with active alcoholism, So I know that's kind of going off on a tangent. I guess that's tangent one, but yeah, that was the early years, like the college and the years that I should have been, I guess, like learning and trying to have a little bit of fun, was really more about having a whole lot of fun and not learning a whole lot. So.
Yeah, well, you're not alone in that for sure. It's I was you were young and became a father, and I was older and became a father, and probably we were both at least I look at myself and I'm like, man, I was just so immature, and I was 39 years old, and I was like a juvenile delinquent, because I was still drinking, and I was still. I remember when Ella was born, and I was very proud that I stayed sober for 24 hours. I thought I did something, like, what do you want from me, man? I was there when she was born. I was sober for 24 hours. It's just crazy, just crazy. But I can't imagine how challenging it was when you don't know someone, and then you get into this, and legal issues and all that come with it. And then, so did your drinking escalate from there, Dave?
Oh, sure. And, and I think what was an interesting corollary in what you just said too, is that, I would put, I had things a little bit out of order. You know what I mean? I would always try to, I would have sex with someone before I would find out if we aligned on anything. You know what I mean? Like, it was, sometimes we talk in the rooms about like the spiritual warfare piece, but I think the emotional warfare and what I didn't know to be, the early adoption of some really codependent behaviors on my part, is that I always wanted to put the cart before the horse, and I didn't want to do the legwork. I found a niche in this lifestyle of like smoky bars and cool musicians. I got a restaurant job very early on, and for me, that was my indoctrination into to running with the wild guys. I liked my shtick. I played my role, and a lot of the ideas that I adopted as a young person were from TV and movies, and there was not nobody you didn't hear John Wayne go up to the bar and ask for a skinny margarita or an NA Heineken, let me get one of those 0 alcohol Heinekens. It was, the tough guys. If you're a man, you drink like a man. You win the fight. You don't talk about your problems, and you ride off into the sunset with your perfect person. And I wanted very desperately to curate a life that looked like everybody else's, but I didn't particularly want to do the work that they had to do to get there. I thought that I was entitled to shortcuts, and I also thought that because of some of the things that I'd been through, that I was justified in this destructive drinking. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. My drinking definitely did progress. I do want to back up just a little bit, though, is that, around the time I was in my, I think, late 22, early 23, it was suggested that I maybe go check out an AA meeting, which, my first meeting was at the Park 40 Clubhouse, and it was a daytime meeting. I think I went in on the weekend, and, it was back when you could still smoke in there. And, I was expecting, people asleep in their chairs and trench coats and, brown paper bags, a bunch of just gruff, angry old men. And I found what I was looking for. You know what I mean? I've always focused on the differences rather than the similarities. And, I walked in there, and I was so uncomfortable. It was like, they knew I was new. I didn't know. And they gave me a book. I've still got my very first big book. It sat on a shelf for a decade. And, there's, Mike K's name is in here. There's a lot of people that have passed on. Like there's Jimmy Z and Carl C and Carrie, and some names that I know that you recognize. And the coolest thing, I'll even show this to you on camera here, is this was before they used area codes. Like there were no, like, people weren't rocking cell phones. So, I came in at a cool time, but it was also, immediately I knew I didn't fit in there. I was not comfortable. I heard mostly want, and my heart beating. And when I heard people in the rooms laugh, I was 100% convinced that they were laughing at me, that they could see right through me, that, they'd spilled more than I'd ever drank. And, it gave me another propulsion out the door to, actually, I think in the second meeting, I saw that line in the book, if you're not thoroughly convinced, go out and try some controlled drinking. And I was like, it's a fantastic idea. I'm going to do that. And but yeah, drinking definitely got worse. It was where, when I became aware that there were legal consequences for drinking and driving, I think I started to try and modulate it a little bit more. And by modulate it, I think I mean I just drove a little slower, and tried to not get caught. But the problem for an alcoholic like me is that, I started to lose the power of choice when it came to, like, when I started, I couldn't stop, and I had violent personality shifts as to where I would come in with the mindset of a politician glad handing his way around the bar and getting to know everybody. I was, those people, I became repulsive when I would drink, very argumentative and very standoffish. As my alcoholism progressed, what looked like a Corona commercial quickly became kind of like looked like a Radiohead video. It was just kind of, some dude sitting in the corner by himself, drunk and in some cases crying. It was, my alcoholism was ugly, man. I ended up having to go and serve some time eventually. And, what I wanted to do was the same thing that I've done with a lot of things, which is just bury my head in the sand and pretend it's not happening. Right. Like, let's push this out as far as we can. And I got a lawyer that finally, he called me up one day and he was like, look, he's like, you're in trouble again. He's like, and this is funny because, my dad was always on my side. My dad and mom both loved me very much, but, my attorney called me one day and he was just like, look, he's like, the judge wants to throw you in jail. And, my recommendation to you would be to go check into a facility. And I'm like, oh, well, that sounds nice for somebody that needs it. And he's like, well, if you don't, you're going to have to go surrender yourself. And I was like, I'll get right on that. So I had my dad drive me out to a place called Peninsula. It was a place, that they could get me in pretty quick. I wasn't sure, because I was such a highbrow alcoholic. Obviously, things were going so well that that I thought I was gonna. I didn't know how I was going to qualify. So we stopped at a gas station. This was in the early days of the energy drinks, and so I grabbed a couple of Monsters and chugged them in the car. And when we got to Peninsula, I asked where the bathroom was, and I went in there and did as many push-ups as I could at one time. So my heart rate would spike. I wanted them to think I was having DTs from, alcohol withdrawal. No. And so in my mind, I was faking my way into treatment to thwart the man once again. And the truth is that's exactly where I probably needed to be. But, I just wasn't ready to admit that there was a problem yet. I was still just a kid having fun. And, this was before my son was born. So to me, it was like, who did I really have to worry about? I've always had kind of that cockroach mentality of you can step on me, but I just kind of lay there for a second, get up, and then just wander off in another direction. And that's been a lot of, sadly, kind of like my alcoholism is that, I'll get knocked down and I'll get back up and try and recreate my life. But I've never had any type of foundation for living, not at least that I was being honest with myself about. So, my drinking, I got to travel some. I liked the concerts. I liked I always liked hippie chicks. To me, that was like, when I was 16, I did acid for the first time at a widespread show. It was like 3 days after I got my license, if that tells you anything. 3 days after I'm legal to drive, I'm down at World's Fair Park, drinking with kids from other schools and, taking acid. And I guess suddenly I'd found my people, I guess. But, it comes back to that same thing that we were talking about, is that I've always been seeking connection, just, or intimacy, but just going about it the wrong way.
Yeah, it's, you reminded me, and this was into surprise once I got sober, and it was pointed out to me by David G. And I was like, I had no idea how to have relationships, and you were talking about it, and man, it hit like, it was always physical. Relationships always started out physical, and then, it was, it was some sort of emotional wreck, and then, then it would get mental. And then, then I'd be like, please God, get me out of this situation that I've gotten myself into. And it was pointed out, and Dave said it's in the 12 and 12, on page 117, and it never dawned on me. And it literally says in there, if you want to have like real connections with people, then it starts out spiritual, and then you connect mentally, then emotionally, and then physically. Physical is last. I always put it first, and that's kind of, you reminded me of that's kind of how relationships, how I formed relationships, and why I had no real intimacy or connection. I don't think for until I found this program and found the 12 steps and found a different way to kind of look at the world and the way I handle my life. But anyway, that was a good reminder of that, Dave. What was kind of the turning point, at least later on for you?
Well, that's a good question. And I struggle with wrong dependence. I was able to come into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I guess camp out would be a fairly good way to put it, is that I was a visitor, and I would come in and I would get the fringe benefits of being around the fellowship, I'd go over to people's houses for bonfires. We'd go and do the, your typical Applebee's thing. And I felt connected to I felt connected to a source. It was not a higher power by any means, but the group for me was a sufficient distraction. I could stop drinking temporarily. I proved to myself early on that like I did not have to have alcohol to live. But what always happened for me, and when I say wrong dependence, is that I've struggled with the two topics that someone you may remember used to talk about was the money and the honey, and so I would get the validation that I would need through through earning money at work or from procuring a new drinking buddy. I would always find women that drank the way that I drank, and and we would, as you can imagine, there's some good times in there, but there was also some really messy times. So, I would say that my consistency with staying sober had a lot to do with was I in a relationship, and how was that relationship going? Because once it fell apart or the job fell apart, then I would come back into AA with my tail between my legs, like the book talks about, with a firm resolution not to drink again. And then I'd stay somewhere between 90 days to 9 months, and then I'd go back out. And the turning point for me this go round, and I'm not trying to just make this about relationships, but I met a girl in the rooms, and she was accomplished, and she was sober, and she was she was a professional. She checked the boxes within me that made me feel like if I was with her, then I was okay, and I relapsed a couple of months into us dating, and she, I finally got honest with her, and she looked at me and she said, "Look, I can't date you if you're drinking." And that was the first time that I was like, okay, like I'll give this an honest shot. And I know a lot of great men in AA. I've blown off a lot of really great sponsors that were willing to work with me, but when it was time for the work to be done, I stopped making phone calls. I was a despicable human being, and go figure that an attractive woman was what it took for me to finally hold my feet to the fire and get through the steps. So this is the longest run that I've had clean and sober. But I will say that getting through the steps for the first time a couple years ago, it was a real catalyst for me to want to seek more. I knew that I didn't give 100% all the way around. And, the big change for me, man, was starting to work with other guys. I felt like a total fraud, like I have most of my life, but just taking somebody through, through the big book and sharing my experience, and it made me feel less like an alien. And, I'm working with a sponsor now who's strongly encouraged me to go back and look for the holes in the boat. And for me, those have existed mostly in step 2 and 3. I can sound good. I mean, I've memorized a lot of the basic text, and I can say stuff that makes me sound like I know what I'm doing. But I've always had a problem with relying on a higher power that loves me and wants the best for me. But yeah, my sponsor recently, he shared a quote with me by a guy named Joseph Campbell, and it was on Friedrich Nietzsche. And he said that Nietzsche was I guess he was the one who did the job for me at a certain moment in his life. The idea came to him of what he called the love of your fate. Whatever your fate is, whatever the hell happens, you say, this is what I need. It may look like a wreck, and but go at it as though it were an opportunity, a challenge. So if you bring love to that moment, not discouragement, you will find the strength that's there. Any disaster that you can survive is an improvement in your character. your stature, and your life. So, what a privilege. This is when the spontaneity of your own nature will have a chance to flow. And then when looking back at your life, you'll see the moments which seem to be great failures followed by tremendous wreckage that were the incidents that shaped the life you have now. You'll see that this really is true. Nothing can happen to you that is not positive. That was the first time that I had really been able to look and embrace my past, is that, and it also talks about it on page 124, I think. This was a big shift for me and the family afterward, where they talk about showing others who suffer how we were given help is the very thing which makes life seem so worthwhile to us now. Cling to the thought that in God's hands, the dark past is the greatest possession you have. Like, you mean really? Like, all this shit that I've been through, all this, pardon my French, but just this pure on fuckery, this is my golden ticket. Cling to the thought that in God's hands, the dark past is the greatest possession you have. The key to life and happiness for others. With it, you can avert misery and death for them. And that was the first time that I started thinking that, maybe my experience or my story might have some depth and weight to where I could help another drunk that struggled the way that I did. And so that this was all, it was not wasted. And so this past year in particular, since that relationship that I was talking about came to a close, and I was just destroyed. I had, kind of a choice. My rationale for getting sober was to keep her around. I wanted to keep the, I wanted to keep the relationship alive. So I just didn't drink. But then when the relationship ended, it was kind of like, hey, look, I've started to put down some pillars in my life of like some things that I do believe in, and some relationships in AA that I don't want to wreck. So, it was either redouble my efforts and get in the middle of AA, get in the middle of that boat and start to listen, or to run away again and try my life at drinking again. And I'm very, very grateful that God saw fit to keep me sober through that period of my life. And it's opened the door for me to get to know him. I did not come into Alcoholics Anonymous seeking a spiritual experience. And when I was told that was, that was the only way that it was going to work, I don't know, I was a little discouraged. I was a little worried that, like, hey, look, God gave up on me a long time ago. So, just more ego and more believe in my own bullshit. But, I'm very grateful for patient men and some really patient, kind of like elder women in the program that they were nice enough to tell me to shut the hell up and to listen. And, and I think that's when I started being able to, just listen rather than hear what I wanted to hear. So I know I'm all over the place, Joe, but these last 3.5 years in particular in AA, I'll have a birthday coming up pretty soon, but like, it's been the game changer. It's been I'll give you an example. Is somebody that one of the guys I'm sponsoring, he just left today to go spend an extended weekend with his family, where there's going to be a whole lot of drinking going on. And he's he's kind of like the guy in the middle of all of this. And, he's coming up on his year, and he's been just a model of willingness and open-mindedness when it comes to embracing, his recovery. And I was really worried about him. I slipped him a copy of a new pair of glasses, and I encouraged him to just kind of like, hey, look, man, if you get 5 minutes to yourself, pick up the phone and call me. If you're not able to pick up the phone and call, get in that book for a couple minutes and just see what you find. And we have a relationship that's built on honesty and trust. We have intimacy, like true emotional vulnerability and intimacy. I joined a group that was fairly recently that's based on this he's one of us. He uses his last name, but Mark Houston started this thing about, I guess, 40 years ago, it was called Steel on Steel, kind of this idea that iron sharpens iron. And it's this male accountability group, to where we dig in on some stuff that's a little bit deeper than just your regular AA conversation. We talk about sex, and we talk about money, and not in the ways that I used to talk about it in the bar rooms. We talk about accountability for our families, and running a good program, and seeing if there's a balance between our circle and our triangle. And for me, like, once I've started seeing the truth about myself, it was very hard to run away from it. I didn't. I couldn't live in the lie anymore. So it's like I feel like I've been lucky to finally get a glimpse of what it looks like to try and live in a solution. I feel like I've done a lot of talking without a lot of points, but I give one other example just because I qualified this with my buddy. My AA relationship, when it ended, I was at a very difficult crossroads of, is this now the time for me to run away with my tail between my legs? I borrowed some money from her while we were in a relationship. And, when my dad passed away shortly thereafter, I watched my mom go from having her person to having nobody, when my dad died. And so it became my mission to, like, you know what, I want to find a partner. I would like to find somebody to marry and do this thing together. And she was very upfront with me from the beginning. Like, hey, look, I don't want to get married. I've been there twice, been there and done that. And that's not on my high list of priorities, but, my alcoholism has always led me to believe that I could manipulate people or make them change their feelings to suit what I wanted. And she stayed true to her message, So when I was informed that she didn't want to get married, then my ego jumped in and had to break things off. So for the last year, I've kind of been running around a little, with my I guess navel gazing is the best way to put it. Feeling less than all over again, and having some debt out there, especially within the rooms. And I was able to use that recent experience to help a good friend of mine recently, and told him transparently, man, like, look, if you're not sure that this is what you want, I strongly encourage you to look at the pros and cons of this relationship. And if you were hasty or reactive, to maybe go and make it right. And oddly enough, I had a 2-hour conversation on the phone with that guy that night. We'd been sober about the same time. And then the next day, I'm leaving a meeting at Park 40 at noon, and here comes his very recent ex. She's walking out after the noon meeting. She was not in the meeting. She walked into Park 40 around 1:00. I was outside talking to a newcomer. We had just had a fantastic meeting, and I was really hoping that she was not going to walk up and talk to me. My friend's ex, and of course she walks right up to me, and hey, I'm sorry you're going through what you're going through. We've all kind of gotten sober together. I care for you very much, and I think the right things are going to happen. And I said, if you're looking for an opportunity to get out of yourself, about 10 feet over there is the newcomer. It was a 25-year-old girl, her very first AA meeting ever. Like, she had walked in, not really said much. And I was like, hey, she's getting in her car over there. Why don't you walk over and introduce herself, and let her know that there's some women under the age of 70 in AA. And, because they were both in their, 20s, 30s or whatever. And I was in a meeting this Sunday, and sure enough, here she comes with her new sponsee, I guess, new friend in tow, bringing her to more meetings. And that was when I started to see that when I don't follow the little devil on the shoulder, when I don't avoid, it opens conduits and pathways for me to feel like I'm in the game. You know what I mean? To where I give a little room for God to work rather than David's big ideas. And sometimes the right things happen. But I felt good. That was that right-sized pride that I think I've been looking for my whole life. Drinking was to do the right thing, and then maybe potentially help another drunk. And so that's, that's where I'm at now. I like my job. I like my sober community. And I feel like, more will be revealed. I will never be this many days sober ever again. And I will journal at the end of the night. I'll call another drunk, and I'll do better tomorrow. I'll try to do better tomorrow,
Well, I think it's amazing, Dave, and it's it's being of service, and I think that's kind of whether you're sponsoring guys or just calling guys or talking to a newcomer. When you said you're out there talking to it, I'm like, you're just doing the deal. You're doing the deal, and that's pretty. And you said before we got on, you were saying how you were you felt as comfortable, I guess, as you've ever felt being who you are. I think that's important, man. That's a huge deal.
I didn't think I'd be finding that out at 45 years old. I went and scanned to listen to the last guy that you'd had on, and I think he was about my age, and he was talking about executive careers and toys and things like that. And for me, it's a daily battle for me to not compare. You stayed sober and I didn't. I look at it and I compare. I tried really hard to be a good dad, but my trying hard to be a good dad was not setting boundaries. It was not discipline. It was not the kind of love that I've come to know in AA. It was, let's buy you more stuff. Let's tell you that everything's going to be all right. And also, in some sick ways, living vicariously through my kid is that if he was an excellent athlete, then clearly I was an excellent father. I would drink before his ball games, from an early age, show up in a suit when I hadn't had a suit job, you know what I mean? Come in and look the part. But man, I've just always been full of shit. And to be able to have another man tell me is just like, hey, yeah, me too. And this is what I did to, to start to learn to love myself, was to start taking corrective measures to do better and to be honest about it. I have a life that I don't want to run away from right now. I've started making those financial amends that have caused me the most discomfort in meetings. And I was encouraged early on to never let anybody run you out of your meetings. Man, whether I, have a complete shift in career and end up moving tomorrow, I know that I would go and I would find the winners in AA, and I would be all right. You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, my heart's full of gratitude. I realize it's like we're already at 8:00, man, and I've just like flown through this without really any message. But the big thing is to just, for me, was to do the steps in a way, to do the best that I could, and know that if I didn't do them perfectly, it was all right, and I could go back and do them again. And that's what the last couple of years have been for me, is just, just not being afraid of what other people thought, and just, doing the best that I can, and truly seeking, like, not just seeking the higher power, but seeking community in AA, seeking to be honest rather than to be right. And, man, it's been messy. It's been a messy run, but I wouldn't change anything about it, because it's brought me to a relationship with a God of my understanding that loves me where I'm at. And I think it lets me, show up for my family. It lets me show up in meetings. Sometimes I share a solution. I'm still at that phase where I'm sharing a lot of problems, but it's like, I know it's coming. But I want to be authentic to my sobriety journey. And I spend a lot of time talking to newcomers, man. I spend a lot of time, I took on some service positions, and they've been another thing that have kept me coming back, because I don't want to say I'm going to do something and then not do it. I want my words to align with my actions. And and making a decent stab at it. I like this little life that I'm starting to curate with my higher power and with my brothers and sisters in AA. So I think I'll keep going. I think I'll keep keep seeking and you know keep building some of these new friendships that you know. And this is one thing that I hear a lot of people say, but since I stopped drinking, I haven't gotten a lot of emails, text messages, phone calls from my old bar acquaintances. But if I don't show up in a meeting for a couple of days, I got 10, 20 guys hitting me up. Hey, DC, are you alive? What's going on? And I don't know, man. Just I've found a brotherhood in AA that I could not replicate anywhere else. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't really know where to go from there, Joe. I think it's I think I'm trudging a road to happy destiny. I firmly believe that, and wherever I go, AA is there. I have to travel for work quite a bit, and one of my favorite things to do now, rather than plot out which hotel I'm going to go to based on the frequency of bars that are nearby, is I usually pick one based on where I see good meetings are. I want to be around the solution. So.
Well, and I think you shared a great message today. I really do. I think sometimes we don't know what our message is until maybe you listen to it after it comes out. You'll know. You shared a great message, and I'm glad I've gotten to know you better than I've ever known you. Now I know the rest of it's like Paul Harvey. I know the rest of the story, Dave, which is really cool, and that's a beautiful thing for me, and I appreciate that. Was there anything you wanted to talk about that maybe you didn't get a chance to share?
Contempt prior to investigation. I was just I've always struggled with with coming in with preconceived notions and not giving a chance to let people be who they were, because I was afraid to, one, to look dumb, two, to get roped into some kind of commitment that I wasn't prepared for. For me, letting go of old ideas has been a very slow, grueling, and painful process, but it's been the most beneficial to. I don't know, man. I mean, I just want to be in the game. Like I'm 100% on borrowed time. If life were fair, I'd be dead or in jail many, many, many times over. And so yeah, I try and wake up with an attitude of gratitude. I have a routine of, you'd asked me early on kind of like what my go-to recovery tool was when we were putting together that bio, and I don't think I gave you an answer. But for me, it's been cracking the uncomfortable shell of what prayer and meditation can mean for me when done diligently, and in taking that inside job outside to feel comfortable talking to other people. But I've just always been convinced I was right about things I was absolutely wrong about, and so now I can laugh about it. I'm learning to have a sense of humor about my failures and my misconceptions, and to not take myself so damn seriously. That whole Rule 62 thing is, I don't know. I'm excited for what this next season of sobriety has in store for me. I took a commitment at Park 40 where I joined the board of directors, which I don't know how they didn't background check me for that. And I'm kidding, but no, and I'll take over for our current president next year. And it's like this idea of like, I never thought that that's the position that I would be in. I've got a whole keychain full of keys to different churches and clubhouses and some people's homes. That is not a natural thing for drinking, David. So, it's a privilege, man. It's a good life. And, whenever I get stuck, I know now that the amount of misery that I have to stay in is purely up to me, and So yeah, it's I'm kind of out of excuses at this point. If I want to live a happy life, get in and participate, and go for a walk, pick up the phone and call somebody, and somehow things seem to just work out. So you know, I guess that's my spiel.
Pretty good spiel, Dave. That's a pretty good spiel, man. And I really appreciate your willingness to come on and share, your story, your experience, your strength, your hope. It means a lot to me, and I know it's going to help someone. So thank you for that.
I guess in closing is whatever brings someone into the rooms for the first time, like if you genuinely know deep down that alcohol or drugs are causing you a problem, the one thing that I wish that I was able to listen to early on is that it's not going to get better. I was fortunate to find the rooms at a young age, and I was very lucky to find my way back before I, as the books say, went on to the bitter end. And I was way too big of a chicken to ever kill myself, but I sure was out there, running demolition derby at 3 a.m., trying to make sure I could get some beer before the store closed. But oh man, it's a good life. And, guys like you, Joe, are there's some real like pillars in AA. Like, they say that we come in on the shoulders of giants, and I'm a firm believer in that. And, I'm definitely a shoulder rider, not quite but and I just want to be in the game. I think if anything happens over these next few years in sobriety, is that I just want to continue to grow, and that that pain is the touchstone of all spiritual growth. So we'll see what kind of growth's in store, but I'm excited for it, and I'm excited to do it with with other alcoholics. So appreciate you having me on.
You're welcome, my brother. And I'm glad to be trudging the road with you. We are both standing on the shoulders of giants. I can assure you of that. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them, and for people like yourself, man, who've been willing to talk to people. That's a big deal. Just talking to people in the rooms and letting them know you're not alone. That's that kind of stuff is big deal. But I can't let you go tonight, Dave, without doing our rapid fire questions. I told Dave I wouldn't grade him. I lied. No, I'm just kidding, Dave. There's no grades. There's no grades. But are you ready, sir?
I am ready. Yeah, fire away.
What is your favorite recovery slogan?
Oof, I don't know how rapid this is going to be. It takes what it takes.
What is your least favorite recovery slogan?
Oh, God. We'll love you until you can learn to love yourself.
What do you think is your sobriety superpower?
Connection. I think just identifying with a newcomer and, relating where others can't. I've taken it to just about every extreme that you can. And, I don't run away from new people now. I run towards them. And, that's very contrary to my previous behavior.
If you could say one thing to your former self, what would it be?
Put the hammer down. Be honest, share, talk to people that you trust when you're hurting, and, and to not give up. I think, I think my experience in AA has been failure after failure after failure until something clicked. And so, for anybody that's struggling, regardless of medium, whether it's drugs, alcohol, other things, is that hope is found here. And, it's my resistance that causes me the greatest pain. And so, no cult. There were no DVDs to purchase, after my first meeting. It was an altruistic movement. It always has been. And, I'm just grateful to be on the ride.
What song do you play to lift your spirits when you need a boost?
Oh man, there's a bunch. Gosh, I'll check my phone right now to see what was playing in the car today. I've been jamming out to this dude who is from Tennessee. His name's Josiah Lemmings. He's got this little band called Josiah and the Bonnevilles, and he's been hitting all these high points. He's sober, or at least he sings a lot of songs about sobriety, but he also sings them about breakups, mess ups, and things like that. And I think just being able to accept myself where I'm at, smile, laugh, and sing along in the car, man, it's the latest song is Going Gone by Josiah and the Bonnevilles.
If you could grant yourself one wish to help with your recovery, what would it be?
I'm not gonna lie to you and say that I wish I'd gotten sober at 22 or 23. I think I would grant myself the gift of self-love and self-compassion to shorten the cycle, to shorten the cycle of suffering. I think we all have to go through what we have to go through in order to to find a higher power. I took the slow route, and if you're if you're searching for something, whether it's in the bottle or in the bar rooms or the seedy underbellies of the city, that connection can be found here if you're willing to share honestly of yourself. And I was just incapable of the truth. I didn't know what the truth was. So sticking around until the miracle can happen for sure.
What step do you love the most?
Oh, that's tough, man. I feared 4 and 5 so much because I was convinced that they were going to kick me out. If I showed you my ugly, that you were going to ask me to leave. Now 4 and 5, that's the connection ground. I think a lot of people struggle early on with 1 was not a problem for me. 2 and 3, I had some misconceptions, but I'm always led back to to truth on growing a relationship and relying on my higher power. But 4 and 5, I drug my feet. And I mean, when I say I went through some OG sponsors, I went through some of the best that Knoxville had to offer and just bailed on these guys because I did not want to put that down on paper. And also there were so many blackout spots and a lot of there that I couldn't bring into consciousness with sufficient force just what a little shit that I'd been. Luckily, some really helpful men have been able to help me find the holes and connect some dots through 4 and 5. And now when I sit down with new guys, the stuff that had such a tremendous power over me that kept me separate from all of you is now that, those are the things that fly off the tongue first. And I think creates a sense of ease and comfort for them to open up about, the things that they're ashamed of. So yeah, half 4, half 5.
All right. Fair enough. What step do you love the least?
Ooh, lately it's been a 9th step, the amends process, because I'm still afraid of how people are going to perceive me sometimes, even in sobriety. I think I still feel like I'm going to do it wrong, much like getting on this podcast and being like, dude, I'm just going to blabber for an hour, which I have. Sometimes just keeping it to my side of the street. Hey, I harmed you. I feel like I was wrong in doing this. I want to make things right. And an amend is not an apology. An amend is just a recognition of a wrongdoing in the past, and showing that you want to change that behavior. But the important qualifier at the end of that was really, Marion G was very instrumental when I first heard her story about like, hey, what can I do to make this right? And giving them an opportunity to talk. In most cases, people just want to see you stay sober, some people will close the door in your face, but for the most part, my experiences have been really positive with it. So, yeah, 9. And then also, a 10th step. I like doing my 10th steps, sometimes at night, but it's also sometimes in the morning. And meditation and prayer rather than doom scrolling has also been really beneficial for me in the mornings. Is, take a look at the daily ponderables, look at that reflection, and God, what would you have me be today? Can I show up and participate in my life in a way that's not selfish? Yeah, another 3-part answer.
I love it, Dave. It's all good. What is one of your favorite movies?
Oh, Spy Game. I was talking about this with my sponsor yesterday. It's he's a film buff and he hasn't seen this. It was Redford and Brad Pitt and and it truly is. I look at some of the clandestine parts of our government, to where things really get done, and it's about deception and it's about faking it. And man, I faked it my whole life, so I would look at these guys that got paid to do it and think, I should have been a spy. I've been full of shit my whole life. Why not bring it into agreement with my career? But no, I love Spy Game. It's got a love entity to it. It's got a part where somebody is forced to trust, somebody's let down, but ultimately the mission was the greater good. And I got a lot of favorite movies, man. We could spend a whole other hour talking on that, but I'd have to say Spy Game is probably right up there.
It's a good one. And finally, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gate?
Thought you'd never make it. We thought we may have lost you. But welcome home. I think it's a lot like AA. When somebody comes back after a relapse and people know what it's like, I think welcome home. I'm excited to see my dad. I'm excited to see some other family members and some other friends of mine in recovery that have gone before me. But yeah, I think you're in the right place. Would be a wonderful thing to hear.
It sure would, man. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for coming on the show and for being you. I think you're a pretty awesome fella, to be honest. And you always have good things to share, and you always come off so genuine to me. You always have, and I think that's a pretty cool thing.
Well, one of these days I'll sound like one of you grown-up AAers, but for now, man, I'm just where I'm at, and I'm just grateful to be in the game, man. And I'm grateful that some of these relationships, especially with men like you that have kind of stood the test of time, it gives me hope that, I never thought that my long-term goal would be to be an old timer, and and I haven't earned that seat yet, but I've definitely earned my experience. And man, I just want to be with the winners. I do. I want to be sober. I think one of the biggest goals for me is to die sober, and and have a rich and full life of honesty and love and compassion with my family and my fellow man. And this has given me a runway to start to work on those things, and I'm eternally grateful. So,
well, just remember, if we didn't drink today, we're tied for first place, and that's the deal. So, for the rest of you out there, if this episode meant something to you, please share it with one person who needs some hope today. A new episode of The Cup of Joe Show drops every Thursday at noon. You can listen anytime at thecupofjoeshow.net or on any of your favorite podcast apps, Podbean, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and more. Just search for The Cup of Joe Show. Don't forget the "the." And if you're looking for daily encouragement in your recovery journey, please subscribe to our friends at thedailyponderables.com, delivering inspiration to your inbox every morning. Please like, follow, subscribe, and share, because someone out there needs to hear this today. Have a good day, everybody.
It's just a laid-back vibe, baby.
We hope you enjoyed today's Experience, Strength, and Hope. We are so grateful you decided to join us. Please share this episode with someone who might need it. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Remember, no matter where you are in your recovery journey, you are not alone. Reach up and reach out to someone. Please do not suffer in silence. Until next time, let's take it 1 minute, 1 hour, and 1 day at a time. Thanks for listening to the Cup of Joe Show.